It's very hard to create drum sounds from looped waveforms. And by looped waveform, I'm talking about a sawtooth waveform or a sine waveform. And in my advanced electronic classes, we talk about trying to synthesize drums. We always have trouble when it gets to like snares and hi-hats. We either have noise that we can use or these looped waveforms. And the problem is a looped waveform has the partials are in a harmonic series, which gives us that specific tonality, right? That note. And very often with drums, we're trying to create something that doesn't have a specific note. We don't want it to establish a tonality. We don't want it to ring out with a singular pitch. Instead, we just want it to be this drum sound. And so what they've done, FXpansion Tremor, which is really, really nice, is they have this oscillator designed specifically to give you non-harmonically related partials. So to give you really things that sound like membranes. And in this video, we're going to look at how to work with that oscillator. The challenge of this kind of oscillator is it's kind of unusual. You're probably used to working with things like sawtooth waveforms and square waves. In this, we're going to have to look at kind of a new synthesis type, but also one that's perfectly geared toward making a wide variety of drum and percussion sounds.
The oscillator section in Tremor, really powerful, but a bit unusual. So let's check out how it works. First, we have these couple sections that all contribute to the oscillator sound. We have the oscillator section here, harmonics, noise, and a mixer. After that, the sound is put through a distortion, overall filter, another distortion, and an output. Now, I'm going to turn my filter off for now so we can hear just the output of the oscillator. And you'll notice that I'm just using the oscillator here. In the mixer, I don't have the noise turned up and I don't have the sub turned up at all. I'm only relying on this oscillator to create kind of a big kind of wobbly kick sound. Let's hear it. Right, now if I turn my filter on, much more kick-like because we've kind of filtered out all that high end. But for now, I'll have that off so we can really hear what this oscillator is doing. Now, the harmonics section, I think, is the really interesting part of Tremor in that it switches between two main modes, the membrane mode and the harmonic mode. In the membrane mode, we have that kind of physical model that's kind of emulating the vibration of a drum head in multiple dimensions, which I think is the really interesting part of this synthesizer, so we'll leave it in the membrane mode. The oscillator section should be pretty comfortable if you're used to traditional subtractive synthesis, like with FXpansion Strobe. We have our all-for-all pitch. We can kind of morph between saw, square, and triangle. We have fine-tuning. We have frequency modulation, which is a hardwired modulation for LFO1 to control the frequency of our main oscillator. Pulse width modulation that changes the pulse width of our oscillator if we're in the square wave mode at all. We also have an overall syncing, which gives us a wide timbral content. So this is pretty standard synthesis stuff. The interesting stuff, or what's unique to Tremor, is in this harmonic section. So like I talked about before, in drums, those partials are not harmonically related. And these sections, this section here, is how we control then what we do to those harmonics. How do we pull them away from that typical harmonic relationship that we have in traditional synthesis? And I think the first one, and probably most important, is this space parameter. So if this is at 0, we get that traditional kind of all harmonically related overtones or harmonics. Now, if I increase space, we're going to start getting really interesting out-of-tune harmonics. Right? No longer harmonically related. Now, if I increase roll, it kind of controls how those harmonics decay away from that fundamental frequency. And if I have that way up, it's kind of noisy and buzzy, great for cymbal sounds. So if you're using cymbals, often that's all the way up. If you're doing more kind of kick sounds, we turn roll pretty far down. I like it pretty low. Interesting also is peak, which controls which of these harmonics we're going to emphasize. If you have that all the way at the bottom, really good for powerful kicks like that one, or you might want to bring it up to emphasize the second partial if you want, depending on what you're trying to create. And I find if I'm trying to get a drum sound to really sit with my mix, I'll often go and kind of manipulate peak to have it perfectly in my mix. So I think the membrane section, or that harmonic section, is really a fun one to kind of play with and gets kind of interesting percussion sound because it's so unique to this synthesizer. If we want, we can blend some noise in. That noise has a filter. We can We can kind of see what that filter is doing to the noise. The stereo knob is controlling the stereo width of that noise, and we can see it in the visualizer shown by the distance between these two horizontal lines. And we have a bandpass filter that can be moved over that noise, and we can control kind of resonance of that filter there. We can control the level of 3 different portions of our oscillator. Our oscillator, which is controlled by these 2 sections, our noise, and our sub-oscillator, which can be 1, 2, or 3 octaves below our main oscillator. All right, so if I bring that low-pass filter back in, we get our nice, powerful kick drum. Now, the other part of this kick that I think is really important, and what you're going to have to kind of explore as you're crafting percussion sounds, is your envelope. How is that attack being controlled? And we have 3 envelopes here to control our sound. Our main envelope is going to control the overall decay of our sound. So if I want this to be just shorter, we'll probably decrease our decay setting. And we get that nice kind of punchy kick, or I can increase decay to get that long, maybe hip-hop style kick. We have a great visualizer here, and I can also adjust the curvature of that decay stage, which has a major impact. Right? I find like curvature, adjusting that almost like adjusting a compressor. And I often find that if I really get in tune with how a curve parameter is working on a decay setting of an envelope, it kind of informs how I work with compression also. Because a lot of times you think of compressors as kind of manipulating that curvature of the amplitude decay of a percussion sound. It's really doing something really similar there. So those attack and decay settings in your compressors, you're doing a lot of the same kind of thing when you start manipulating curvature of your amp envelope. Now, I think what is also really important with a lot of percussion sounds is making that attack really bright, but then having it decay away really quickly. And one of the things that I find with Tremor, which is great, is I can get really powerful, bright attacks that decay away really quickly. They really snap, and I think that's what snap is. And the most important part of that is our fast envelope, right? This is a really super quick envelope, modulates really smoothly. I love how it sounds on things, and one of the most important things this does, I think, is modulating the pitch of our oscillator. Now, if we want to assign this envelope to control something, it's not a built-in modulator. We have to do it manually. So we'll use the transmod system. I click on a modulation source at the bottom, and F envelope stands for fast envelope. As soon as I do that, you'll see blue lines show up around all these knobs, or around some knobs, and those blue lines are indicating what the fast envelope is modulating. And when we see that, we have this fast envelope modulating many things. Filter cutoff, filter resonance. I have it doing space and peak and roll in our harmonics, which we just looked at, and I'm having it control the pitch of our main oscillator. And I think this is really how we can craft this sound. So let's try something out. I'm gonna try to assign more or less pitch modulation. Now, if I come over to this knob, just so you see this, look what happens if you look down here at the voice modulation sources. Look what happens when I drag over pitch or I drag over peak. You see how some of those are flashing? That is telling me which of the modulators are modulating this parameter. Really handy. And if I hover over pitch, we'll see that both the fast envelope and the slow envelope are both modulating pitch. I think that's kind of useful. Now, if I increase how much the fast envelope is controlling pitch, we get that really bright attack on the sounds. Now, if I was to increase the decay on this, we can really hear it go, right? It's making that oscillator move really fast from high frequency down to low. If I decrease the decay, we just get that click. And just those variations have a huge impact on the snap and the pop of our kick drum. Now I'm also controlling the peak of this membrane and the roll. Remember when roll was high, we had all that buzzy high end, and when it was low, we didn't have that much buzz. I'm also controlling my filter, so it runs up high and then comes down low. So having that fast envelope and controlling many parameters, that lets you control the attack of your sound. And for me, just that is how we get really punchy, snappy sounds. So hopefully this helps kind of craft kind of powerful kick drum sounds in Tremor, and hopefully you're getting a sense for how modulation works here and why we might want to use that fast envelope to really fine-tune the attack of our percussion sounds.